The small group that Jesus ran, ideally, it's going to be a reinforcing relationship between up to 4 people from your small group or Sunday school class. Jesus took his inner circle from the 12. That, I think, is a great example to have. And if we followed it, it would help reinforce the relationships that already exist from your Sunday school class or from your small group. Now, some churches will just create a program and say, hey, if you want to be in a mentoring relationship, sign up, and we'll figure out who the mentors will be and who the mentees will be, and we'll create your groups for you and manage it that way. And so there are pros and cons to that. I mean, if you're in a Sunday school class of just 30-somethings or 20-somethings and you want to be mentored by someone older than you, maybe has kids your age, you're not going to be able to get that from your Sunday school class. And so I get being able to say, hey, I want to be paired with someone much older than me, or someone maybe, it's a nursing, someone that just started a career in nursing. She's 25 and she'd like to have someone with a few more years in nursing as her mentor. So maybe a 35-year-old. Okay, so even maybe they're in the same group, maybe they're not. So the point is that the bottom line for small groups is a lot of churches are missing out on a lot of potential of spiritual growth, accountability, being able to memorize scripture together, being able to do ministry together, and do life-on-life discipleship, because they're missing that third circle. You can call them micro groups, you can call them D groups, accountability groups, whatever, but it's something smaller and distinctive from your small group ministry. All right, so let me talk big picture for a minute. Now, there's pros and cons to each type of circle in the church. Your large group, your large circle, is a great way for the pastor to communicate to the entire church at the same time, to be able to preach the word, to proclaim it, for the word to work on people's hearts and minds, and for them to receive it and chew on it and hopefully do something with it. But it's one-way communication. It's one of the least effective forms of communication that we know of, based on different studies on how people learn. Most people are not going to remember the sermon the next day. Some will, some won't. By the next week, it's like, I'm not sure what he preached on, but I remember it was good. Unless you're like in a series. Yeah, we're in Job. He preached on Job 3 last week. It's going to be Job 4 this week. How effective is that? That's another topic for another day. But the point is, you have one-way communication for your large group environment, and that has some pros and cons to it. Then in your small group, your Sunday school class, somewhere between 8 and 15 people usually, you have a teacher. Some classes lecture, and I really think that's kind of a misuse of the time. Really, it'd be a lot better if teachers recognize that there's more power in circles than in rows. Think about that. When you're teaching in a circle, that's inviting people to interact, to ask questions, to engage with the content. When people are in rows, it encourages them to sit and listen like a class, like a school classroom, where, you can raise your hand and ask a question, but the main purpose of that is lecture. And really, in that small group environment, I don't think Jesus ever had his disciples in rows. They probably all sat in a circle, or they're walking along as a group, and people had the freedom to chime in and contribute and engage with each other, not just the teacher, but engage with each other in conversation. And yes, you can do that some in a classroom environment, but it's so much more conducive if you do it in a more group environment where people can actually face each other, not just be talking and see the back of someone's head in front of them. So you get higher engagement. You actually know what people are thinking and wondering, because they have the opportunity to talk in a small group environment. You get that feedback loop that's really important and helpful for the teacher to know if they're actually getting what you're saying. Whereas in preaching, people can check out and you don't know unless they fall asleep in the pew. You just don't have that feedback loop. And then in the accountability group, you have trust. In that smallest group, I like calling them D groups, but some people call their small group ministry D groups, so it can get kind of confusing on terms. But it's that group of usually up to 4 that meet weekly. And the nice thing is, some small groups are what you consider closed small groups, which means no one new can come into the group. And that allows people to build trust and to be able to be more open. and they know what to expect because they know who's going to be there. Sunday school is considered an open group, which means any visitor can come any week, which means if someone wants to be transparent, they're less likely to be around a visitor because they don't trust that person yet. So to mitigate that, these D groups, or these groups of up to 4, sometimes it's 1-on-1, 1-on-2, but 1-on-3, a group of 4, to me is the ideal. And there you do have trust, you have explicit accountability, and confidentiality. So in Sunday school, yeah, things are confidential, but things can leak. Something said in a D group or in a micro group of 4 or less, that is known to be confidential. You can share whatever you need, you can spill your guts, you can ask for advice, you can talk about difficult situations, and know that's going to stay there. And that's a great place for people to grow, and I think that's why Jesus modeled having an inner circle, even though he didn't necessarily use it for the same purposes. So in my heart and my mind, the 3 circles is how church should be done. It's what every believer should be taught is the way that their priorities should go. To me, the number 1 priority is your small group, your Sunday school class. If you had to choose between big church and Sunday school, go to Sunday school. Next to that is your accountability group. Next to that is church. And if you're going to your accountability group or your group of 4 or less, they should be asking if you were in church that week. And that should be encouraging you to be in church. I think in a lot of ways we have things backwards in the church. We say if you can only go to one, go to the sanctuary. And maybe situation is where that is true, but ideally everyone should make their small group the most important thing they do every week.